you ready to begin?
Anurag, there's a place up here if you want to sit closer. You bring a pillow. Om Brahmanandam Paramasukram Kevalam Gyanamurtim Vandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamashadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tannamami. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and illusion and realize the truth in this life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupastiti Reva Moksho Brahma Dvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome everyone today, Saturday, to the SRV Associations, where we gather to study in the salient philosophical systems of Mother India, yoga, Tantra, Vedanta, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, Shaivism, Shaktism, Vaishnavism. I could go on and on. Because Mother India has contributed so much to all levels of divine life. That is, whether you look at it at the non-dual level, Advaita Vedanta they call it, or whether you're looking at it from the standpoint of qualified non-dualism, which is rather like Christ saying, I'm the vine and you're the branches. That is, you realize there's some sort of connection between you and that unseen, unspoken, unfortunately often unsought divine reality within us. Or even if you're a dualist, I'd say even if you're a rank materialist, Vedanta has something to show to you. That is basically that a creation out of nothing is a ridiculous assumption, or that matter could create a soul, a ridiculous assumption. A soul can't be created. A soul is pure and perfect, as we just chanted, and there's only one of them, and we're all parts of it. And that one soul is called Ishvara when looked at from the standpoint of name and form. That is the highest ideal. Your Jesus, your Buddha, your Krishna, and so forth. And it's called Brahman or Allah or Almighty Father, or by other beautiful appellations. If you look at it from the standpoint of Samadhi or Nirvana, that is the goal of yoga, the authentic goal of yoga, which means union, of course. Doesn't mean a union that happens post-mortem, or a union that happens because you do practice, or a union that happens through evolution, or a union that happens because you purify your mind and senses. It's a union that's already a matter at hand. It's a fact of existence. So that's what the word yoga means, and the word moksha, freedom, means a freedom that's always at hand, always and ever at hand. And the soul simply needs to look within and see that. And if it can't see that, it has to strip off certain overlays and coverings, themselves assumed by the embodied soul, not cast there by God or devil. Assumed by the human soul, therefore must be stripped away, and there is where your practice comes in. And the soul is ever perfect. It doesn't become perfect by yoga, doesn't become perfect by practice, doesn't become perfect by bowing at the Guru's feet. It doesn't become perfect by studying the scriptures or by destroying the mind's waves in meditation. It's already perfect. It's pure and perfect in its very inception, and that's where words limit us, because it has no inception. They call it originless. It has no origins. So being born in Christian nation, as it were, in this time, we have to look at Christ's teaching of I and my Father are one as the absolute truth. He didn't really mean his religion to be based upon origins, because everything is originless. Nature, matter, the soul, God. No beginnings, middles, and ends there. Just one continuum. The distinction is made, though, by Lord Buddha that if you want to get off that wheel of birth and death, going and coming to the ancestors, back to the humans, and so forth, that you're going to have to divorce nature. You're going to have to go get a divorce in the high court. And that judge is going to have to be Advaitic. And you're going to have to prove to him that you know that you're one with the Father. Or in our tradition here in SRV Loka, one with the Mother, because Divine Mother is our highest ideal, Mother Kali that Sri Ramakrishna worshipped. And that indivisible oneness that we speak about in terms of Mahakali or Parabrahma or Paramatman, then is evinced and proven through one's purification process. That is, it's a reality beyond a second, as we said. Brahma Advitiya has no second competing factor with it. All is one in it. Everything is soluble into Brahman, like a sugar cube into tea. So those teachings are always at the very root of our gatherings, called Jnana Yoga, in this particular instance, but tonight called Bhakti Yoga, when we meet for puja downstairs in our shrine room. And we show that there's no difference between bhakti and jnanam ultimately, that they're the two wings of the bird. A bird can't get off the ground without two wings, so we need a deep devotion to God, as Gyanasri was just reading out of the Gospel before we started into our live stream. Welcome to our live stream audience, by the way. And we also need that sharp, discriminating sword of wisdom that Mother Kali carries in her hand to cut off the ego, and cut off the false superimpositions of Maya, or Buddha called samsara, so we can gaze upon the face of the original truth which exists inside our very self. And that the seer and the saint and the sage and the savior has done. Now it's up to the sadhaka to do the same. Sadhaka means one who practices. So when we meet in an atmosphere like this, we meet to strip away those fallacious coverings that have veiled the truth from our inner vision. Might as well veil it from our outer vision too, the way we're going about our lives. We need at least a dharmic life, something that's beyond moral and ethics, because moral and ethics has proven to us over several thousand years that it's not going to take us very far. We're going to need something higher. In other words, it's not so much a matter of thou shalt not kill, because death is happening all the time in this world by various means. It's more a matter of thou cannot kill. You cannot kill what is not born. And that's the meaning of everything is without origins. It has no beginning, it has no end. So it was never born, and it never dies. Krishna gives that teaching to Arjuna there on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. First thing he says to the warrior before he has to go out and fight his relatives on the opposite side of the battlefield, fine predicament that Maya has produced. And the way the cookie crumbles, as they say, the way things divide. So this urge to realize the formless reality is approached through the Dharma. It is something that is more about precepts and vows to live a divine life. And that will take us to a higher place, to divine life, and divine life will take us to transcendence. Eternal life, Christ called it. So there are different levels of this disappearance of ignorance. And that's why I put this up for study to begin with, because we ended with that, if you remember, in our last class. That was 2 months ago here at Portland SRV. SRV has 3 chapters, basically. Although it has students all over the world, it has a chapter in San Francisco and one here in Portland, Oregon, and then in Hawaii, on the big island of Hawaii. So if you're in any of those places and want to come in for a refreshing dip in the ocean of wisdom, these places are always open to you. And I hope that you dive deep into the ocean of God's beauty. For there you will encounter the gem of love. And I hope that you go seek the Vrindavan in your heart where Sri Krishna plays with his loving souls. And I hope that you will light up wisdom's shining lamp and let it shine unceasingly with burning flame in the temple and shrine of the heart. Of course, these aren't my own words. You might be able to tell these are beautiful sentiments out of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which we were just reading while we were waiting for our live stream audience to join us. So now that we're all together in this place, we can go on with our study of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and it proceeds by this chart. We were looking at it in terms of the disappearance of ignorance. And I mentioned love and wisdom, didn't I? That love and wisdom is evinced here in these 2 choices that the soul has. Up the left-hand side of the chart, you see how a being moves from a rather unconscious state, a sort of insouciance of the soul. Right? I think the term we would use nowadays was, let's party. And he moves on from that state of socialization and so forth, and goes on to happiness, a kind of sukha, they call it, sukha dukkha, and then moves on to mudita, joy. There's that quote, for instance, that Sri Ramakrishna uses here: the happiness of worldly man slowly declines as his spiritual joy becomes deeper. So happiness becomes less and less a desire in your mind, and you begin to feel this overriding joy, or mudita. You know the song, right? Because we often sing it. Prema mudita manase kaho Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram. Prema mudita manase kaho Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram. Of course, our chosen deity in this case would be Sri Ramachandra Kripalu. That is, that one who is full of grace, one of the earliest avatars, or maybe the earliest avatar we can think of if we think of human beings. Way back even before Krishna's time, manifestation who Krishna became, Ram to Krishna, and now 2,000 years into this present Christ era, we find Ramakrishna, who is the Ram of our Ramakrishna, and the Krishna of our Ramakrishna is there now, today, with Sita along with him, that is Sri Sharda Devi, who is my teacher's teacher, who taught right here in this very city, just a number of blocks away, for some 40 or 50 years at the Vedanta Society, taught us well and told us to go on spreading this Vedantic wisdom like an underground river. I might mention at that point that the signs of this underground river surfacing every once in a while are what's going on, say, this year, in the 150th centenary year of since Swami Vivekananda arrived here with the original teachings of Vedanta, to spread it among the Westerners and around the world. And if you just go online and type in that word, Vivekananda, or any words associated with him, then you'll find out how much is going on in his name right now all around the world. I've just been to India and seen it, and I was in Nepal a year ago and I saw it there happening even before the year, and then it's going to go on into his 151st year too. They're going to make it a 2-year celebration. So there's a great recognition of this superlative soul whom Sri Ramakrishna called a Nitya Siddha, an eternally perfect soul. And so we meet quite in his honor, his beautiful oil painting there that sat in New York most of its life and was lent to us by Sheila Hickson and the Hickson Foundation, sits there on our mantelpiece, and we every morning do invocation in front of it after our hour's meditation down in the shrine, in honor of that great soul who said things like, "We shall crush the stars to atoms, we shall unhinge the universe." Don't you know who we are? We are the children of Sri Ramakrishna. So Sita and Rama have come again, as he said in one of his beautiful songs that he wrote. That one who roared out the message of Vedanta with a voice like a lion on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He who was once Rama, he who was once Krishna, has come again, with Sita by his side, and you might say with Hanuman next to him, and the great Vivekananda who leaped the ocean to be with us here and bring us these teachings. So we will worship tonight in Bhakti fashion, like this side of the chart, and then we will also worship in a transcendent fashion at the same time. We will do puja in a non-dual way, which is something I saw my teacher doing, and I didn't believe it was possible till I actually saw him in action. But he would speak the highest Advaita Vedanta on the podium and then go down into the shrine room and offer flowers to the deities, as if there was no difference between duality and non-duality, between God and man, between creature and creator, between nature and spirit. No difference, just that inherent oneness of Advaita. Or not to-ness. I was teaching at a few of the correctional institutions, as I do when I come to the mainland here. We call this the mainland. We're out in the islands, see. So I teach at the prisons or institutions, and I was telling them, you can't really call Brahman or Allah or Almighty Father one, because you'd be limiting it, so sometimes you could say not to. It's just this indescribable, unspeakable, or an indeterminable mass of pure conscious awareness, as Shankara has said in the scriptures. So, can't really worship that, in a sense. It would be a very transcendent position you'd have to adopt to even catch a glimpse of it. So that's why there are basically two different routes to that apex of non-dualism. One is going more towards this way of happiness, joy, as we just said, prema mudita manajit sekaho, and then you get jnanam, that is wisdom, which we're talking about right now. You get contentment, tripti, and peace. The peace that passes all understanding is still waiting for you, but you get a sort of peace that allows you to meditate on Brahman without any deviation. Very hard for people to sit in meditation. When you talk about it in terms of the 8 limbs of yoga, then you've got what I call mental asana. I have a new chart on that to show you today or tomorrow. It's to try and get people off the physical asanas and away from those for a while, because they've been taking over the word yoga in an unhealthy way. But thinking everything more in terms of mental asana, a position you take. If you can master mental asana, you will never have to do a physical asana at all. You will sit like this. The mere sitting will open up the base of the spine, and then Mother Kundalini power will start rising as a matter of course. If you have this mental asana right, or what Buddha called in his Eightfold Path, right perspective, or right orientation. So I was telling some of the inmates in the prison that I know people that have sat in meditation for 10 or 20 years but haven't even begun to concentrate yet. And they're sitting there thinking about some trash in their mind, or brooding on something, or thinking about objects. So one of the hardest things to get over is thinking about objects. You talk about lust and anger and fear and passion and greed and envy and jealousy and shame and remorse and pride and delusion, what we call the 6 fetters, 8 fetters and the 6 passions. Get thee behind me. Those things are unworthy of your notice. What you want to do is begin to take that mind and make it noble, take it off of appearances of things, and make it unmixed, make it pure, and place it on the kingdoms of heaven within you, or render it able to concentrate. Can't concentrate, then you can't meditate. And you can't concentrate until you're able to take the mind off of objects. So the father of yoga says that one great impediment, viparyaya, vikshepa, they call it in yoga, is the inability of the mind to withdraw itself from the world. It thinks the world is all there is. The world is my oyster. But it takes a long time for a pearl to form in an oyster, and it has to come up with something, a grain of sand that irritates it first, doesn't it? So irritation is the first sign of renouncing this world, like Christ did. Here in the West, we follow Christ, but are we practicing Christ-like renunciation? So if we are householders, then of course we're not going to practice monastic renunciation. But Sri Ramakrishna said you can still practice internal renunciation. You give up the world inside because you know it's unreal. What does unreal mean? As far as our culture and its religion called science is concerned, unreal means particles shifting at a billionth of a second. If you haven't made a conclusion after you found out that all objects are made of particles shifting at a billionth of a second, then you haven't come to any profound siddhanta, means conclusion, about this world yet. And it was that very conclusion that made Christ go to the wilderness and made Buddha sit under the bo tree for 49 days until he got nirvana, caused Muhammad to go on the mountain and other great souls to withdraw from this world. that great conclusion was, as it were, on the tip of their mind. But that mind had to be purified first, so it had to take a certain mental position. It had to get into a certain asana, or maybe several different asanas. First an asana that purified, then an asana that made them spiritual, and then an asana that made them sempiternal. They stayed the same. What's an example of that kind of asana? How about Adhyatma Brahma asana? Adhyatma Brahma is one of the greatest sayings in Vedanta. It means this self is Brahman. So if I take the stance that this self is Brahman, that I and my Father are one, that's going to be very helpful for me, isn't it? Well, maybe I can't manage that yet. See, I don't know that the jiva really is Shiva yet. It's going to take me some time to figure that out. So I should take maybe a little bit more conditional position. Like, I know the 24 cosmic principles. What are the 24 cosmic principles? 5 elements, 5 subtle elements, 5 active senses, 5 senses of knowledge, and the fourfold mind. They're not that hard to memorize, but those who do memorize them come back with them in the next lifetime, and come back with them in the next lifetime after that, until they are able to assume an asana like Adhyatma Brahma asana, the self is Brahman, after they've known everything from the inside out, right up and down the amber stairs of birth and death, from the lowest principle or the grossest principle called earth, all the way to God's cosmic mind called Mahat, the great. And everything that goes in between in steps and gradations, just like following a trail of breadcrumbs back into the source, or connecting the dots. Let's see. How about earth with smell? How about water with taste? How about fire with sight? How about hearing with feeling? Hearing with ether, see? And then touch with air. See? How about those 5 connections? So if I just leave the 5 elements and the 5 senses divorced from one another, then I'm sort of living a fragmented life. In fact, I could even fall into a kind of hedonism, a kind of rank materialism, you see, and then forget completely my true nature, how connected it is, and never know the meaning of the kingdoms of heaven are within you. Still start looking for them outside. Maybe I'll even find an angel or a god floating around up there on a cloud. That chance, we haven't yet. So it's all within you. Kingdom of heaven lies within you, and these are gradated steps by which you proceed. And these steps could just as easily be put in terms of qualities, transcendent or devotional. So I'm not going to labor this chart very much, other than just to say we saw it already, but if you arrive at peace, you get some kind of equanimity, and then you get bliss, where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. Sing high that note, Sannyasin bold, say,
Om Tat Sat Om.
Oh my goodness. So that is the song of Sannyasin, the very first verse, song of the ever-free soul. So you wake up the note, he says, the note that had its birth far off. Far off means far in, back at the primal root of things. In the beginning was the word, in other words. That note. That's the first vibration. Everything else vibrated out from that. And the whole secret of creation is Srishti Rahasya, is that it's all based on vibration. So science has at least seen the tip of the iceberg. But now it has to dive deep in the ocean where that iceberg sits, you see. And so it can discover the whole bulk of the iceberg, going right back to the cosmic mind of Brahman. So if you do that by this way, or you could do it by, like I say, starting out by seeking the Dharma, getting some holy company, sadhu satsanga, studying the scriptures, contemplating them, doing some austerity, practicing a sadhana, developing a good daily sadhana, which would be your 4 yogas of meditation in the morning and night, study of scriptures, as I just said, practicing devotions, increasing your faith and devotion in God, however you look at God, form or formless, or by whatever name you call God. and serving all beings as God. Those 4 yogas would be a good description of a sadhana that Swami Vivekananda would recommend. Then you go on up to attainment, get something under your belt so you can rely on it, and then finally para, you get transcendence. And that transcendence, non-duality, is called Brahmagyan, and the same thing on this side would be called Prema Bhakti, the highest, deepest love and the most exacting transcendent wisdom, are one and the same at that apex. So we looked at that quickly, and I just wanted to show it to you, and at the same time show you this chart, because this is an old war horse we often bring back several times. And there you see up the right-hand side of the chart, your right, my left, avidya, aparavid, paravid, and parama Advaita. That is, avidya is ignorance. So we want to asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma joytir gamaya, mrityur ma amritam gamaya. We want to go from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, and from the illusion of death to eternal life, or move beyond what is unreal to the real. So this mithya-gyan, or avidya, it's called, is that son of a barren woman that's always haunting us. See? What's your name? Where do you come from? Oh, I'm a son of a barren woman. Doesn't make sense to me. See? So everything unreal, everything devilish, everything that you want to get behind me has to be gotten out of the way. This is the first hell in our tradition. If there is any hell, it's not a location in space and time. It's a darkness in your mind. And you just bring in the light and it goes away. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. There's a cave, dark for 1,000 years. But the explorer breaks into it one day with a torch. How long does it take the darkness to go away? 1,000 years? Goes away in an instant. So we must bring that light of Parama Advaita or Paravid into the chamber of the mind. And so it will light up that, and then it will light up the shrine of the heart, and we'll remember ourselves, remember all our past lifetimes. Krishna tells that to Arjuna in the Gita. Remember all my past lifetimes. I learned these teachings from Vishvasvat, one of the primal souls, early on. And now I pass it on to you several thousand years later. And we learned it from Buddha and from Christ 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And now he's here passing it on to you see, in the form of Tibetan Buddhism, in the form of Zen Buddhism, in the form of Advaita Vedanta, and other salient systems of India, as I started out saying. So if you want to move up from avidya, you go to a paravid. A paravid is lower knowledge, sciences, secular subjects. You bring the light of intellect into your mind. But remember, you're not the intellect. You are the container. You are the contained. Intellect is the container, so what's contained by that is intelligence itself, what science doesn't account for. So basically there is an intelligence that's ever flowing from receptacle to receptacle, from vehicle to vehicle. Vahana is the word in Sanskrit. There's a vehicle that carries. And that intelligence is bright and scintillating. It lights up the corridors of the mind. See, basically, it's something like this. I was thinking before. Ganachana drishtir ganachana arkam yatha nisprabramman yate chati mudaha tata bhavad bhatiyo muda drishte sa nichopalabdis swarupoham atman. That's one of the verses of the Hasta Amalaka Stotram. Fruit in the palm of my hand. I can see myself as easily as you can see a fruit of the palm of your hand, as Holy Mother said. So it means the ignorant, seeing clouds come, think the sun has expired. Those same souls, seeing nightfall, think the sun is no more existent. But ever shining, always present. This is even more true of Brahman, the reality. And Brahman and I are one and the same. We are not different. There are very few non-dual stotrams like that you have found put to music or have been composed expressly by the composer to evince that mental asana, as I was talking about, of absolute oneness. If you say oneness, it means there must have been two-ness once. We want to say this homogeneity, this synthesis, this integral state of consciousness by its very nature, like water, pure water poured into pure water, we say when we do the puja, right? Ya dakam shude shudama siktam tadrageva bhavati. Like pure water poured into pure water becomes the same. So become the selves of the illumined souls who realize their oneness with Brahman. So even in the puja you're doing that. Every little act you do is really about that and this. So you do the deer mudra, mriga mudra it's called. What is there is also here, and what is here is also there. So you're always trying to remove that line of demarcation. Render the internal and the external into one indivisible state, because that's the way it is. And it's only our separation into body, prana, mind, intellect, and so forth that has caused that apparent division. So the sun stops shining, the clouds have come, see? And we think it's gone. You pick up Time magazine and it says, God is dead. See? But you look inside, where's the seers and saints on their editorial staff? Don't the seers and saints know about God? What does a Time magazine editor know about God? Is that his province? So who am I listening to here, you see? I have to go to the illumined souls to find out about God. And then I can decide for my own self, but I can't take false representation. So if you move up from aparavidya to aparavidya, or from avidya to aparavidya, you've made a good stance, good stride. And then paravidya is waiting you. That's the supreme knowledge. Sometimes the seers divide paravidya into highest scriptural knowledge and teachings like this. But some of the seers reserve it only for the highest spiritual experience. Scriptures and so forth would fall still in the higher level of aparavid, religion and so forth. But when religion turns to spirituality, then you have this paravid, this supreme knowledge. That has to be a matter of your own direct spiritual experience. That's called nididhyasana, or by other wonderful words in Sanskrit like anubhava. Anubhava. It is the grace of God, to realize the oneness of all existence. It's what comes after I contemplate things deeply. So we've sat around long enough, you see, looking inside and outside. How about looking at who I am, the nature of my very self? Take that consciousness out and examine it and find out all that it is. And at the same time, it'd be helpful if you found out all that it isn't too. You'll never know who you are until you find out what you're not. And that's the problem of these people meditating 10, 20 years. They've been meditating on some high saying or meditating on scriptures or this and that, but they don't know yet how to discriminate the wheat from the chaff. And if they had have done that in the beginning, then they could have made very swift progress in meditation. According to Vivekananda, following the path with the right mental attitude, that asana, manasana we call it, then you could become a yogi in 6 months. So it behooves us to sit up and take attention to that kind of detail. We examine our own consciousness. That's called Atma vichara, Atma vichara, inquiry into the nature of the self, the Atman, or Buddha nature, however you want to call it. So we've also looked at this quite a bit. Nice quote at the top there, when you get to Paramadvaita, Sri Ramakrishna used here a very simple analogy. An agyani, that's someone who has no jnana, no knowledge, does not know that there is fire potential in wood. A jnani knows there is fire potential but cannot bring it out. But a vijnani, or a brahmagyani, not only knows that fire is potential in wood, but gathers it up, strikes the flame, cooks the food, and feeds others. So if you find a soul like that in this world, then you know that brahmagyani is alive and well today in this world, and you'll be able to benefit by what that soul strikes, that chord that soul strikes in you, that causes you to wake up and reflect in a deep way. Well, everything else on this chart is pretty much a ladder. Here you find Michigyan or avidyas, actions that are mindless, deluded, violent, harmful, spiteful, hateful, jealous, and evil. Somebody said the other day to me that I'm a materialist. I believe that consciousness came from matter. I said, well, that's an odd thought to me. That's everything. I've never heard anything like that from my teachers, that consciousness preceded matter. That is, anterior to life and mind is the Atman, says the Mundaka Upanishad. Anterior means before, by the way. Anterior to both life and mind is the Atman. So before mind even got touched by intelligence, if it ever did, finally, then that was long before it gave way to matter. No mind, as my teacher used to say, no mind, no matter. No matter, never mind. So if you don't see matter out there, name and form, then there's no mind there, or the mind has withdrawn itself into what's called an indeterminate state, unmanifested prakriti, back into that chest of drawers that only mother holds the key to. Everything has gone into a formless state, like your deep sleep state tonight, for instance. Have you ever examined that? Speaking about examining your consciousness, you sit and reflect on your deep sleep state when you wake up, and find many treasures untold there over time. So pretty much we say that these kinds of actions disprove materialism. It's funny, you'd think they would prove materialism, but they disprove it, because everything that science can't account for is in psychology. And everything psychology can't account for is in spirituality. In other words, our science, the science of the Vedantist, is Sankhya, 24 cosmic principles. It proves the whole chain in and out. And we're constantly going in and out, not only over 4,320,000,000 year cycles, we're also going out every lifetime and in and out. And then we're also going out every day and night when we go from waking to dreaming to deep sleep. And then we're also going in and out every breath we take. You see, the in-breath, the held breath, the out-breath, and so forth. It's all one eternal moment, you see. And they're trying to get us to understand that. So you don't have to wait till the end of evolution to uncover your true self. So our science is Sankhya, and our psychology is yoga, and our spirituality is Vedanta. So those three things are what we rely upon to escape the vicissitudes and vagaries of life. See, and this is science can't account for this. With all its utopian society and everything it grants us, it cannot account for the evil person. See, only psychology can begin to account for the evil person who wants to study why. But psychology begins to muck it up when it gets into studying the weeds instead of the flowers. See, yoga tends to concentrate you on those eternal verities that are in your mind, those positive virtues, and pull you up by your bootstraps that way. Is that escapism, or is that dangerous to leave those impure places in your mind untended? Or is it more like they say, don't, if you have a clear pool, don't stick the stick in and stir it up, because it'll take days and days for the sediment to settle again. We think maybe it's more like the latter case, because the mind is impure by nature. You cannot purify it, really. When we say pure mind, what we mean by that is transcendence. You get above the mind. Why? Because you're not the mind. If God isn't his mind, then you shouldn't be your mind either. You know, God has a mind called Mahat, the Great, and everything is there. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Trinity is there. I'll show you a chart on that in a minute. But God is not that mind, because God is beyond the mind and beyond thought. God can never be a form, so it cannot be matter and it cannot be energy. So that's going to cut materialism and science out of the picture. And it cannot be a thought. So that's going to cut psychology out of the picture. So what you're going to have to end up with is some grasp of the true nature of things, what is truly spiritual by nature, what is sempiternal. That means everlasting, by the way. So as you step up a ladder like that, you find out that the presence of evil and the presence of suffering are always on the mind of the saints and seers, but it's on their mind in a different way than ours. We brood on them. And that's called the curtain of nescience. The curtain of nescience is thickened by brooding. The curtain of nescience is a rather natural thing. It's like a veil flowing off of Divine Mother's head and leading from formless dynamism down to the deep sleep state and into dreaming, and then finally to the waking state. So it consists of, from all that we can tell, because the Buddhists call it curtain of nescience, cloud of unknowing. Why is that gathering around our heads, keeping us from living in constant recognition of our true nature, living a divine life? Why is it so hard to do that? So they say that the curtain of nescience is thickened by brooding, but its actual components are ignorance, fear, and doubt. So it's really not that complicated a teaching. You think curtain of nescience, I can't ponder that right now. It gives me a headache usually. But basically when you look at it, it's just your fears, your doubts, and your ignorance. See, right at the very bottom, avidya. So what you're going to want to do is bring the light in, not focus on the darkness. Water the water. Water the water. That's good. Water the flowers. Pure water poured into pure water. Water the flowers, not the weeds. And try that for a while. Assume that mental asana of purification. And those things that are salubrious, healing, healthful. They're not the highest, but you cannot see the highest with the lowest. The mind has to become high in order to see the Almighty, the highest. So mind is going to be important, Holy Mother said. You have to take this mind with you to see Brahman. So it's very important at this stage of the game. You can't just, like I just said, say, oh, we're not the mind, so let's just forget it. That's not what I meant. You purify those things that are acting as shadows or curtains in front of your vision. If thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. That's in Christianity. How about in Buddhism? Lord Buddha said, I have the Dharma eye inside of me. That's Buddhism. How about Vaishnavism? You must awaken the Jnana Chakshu, Arjuna. That's Krishna. The Jnana Chakshu is the eye of wisdom. In 6 different religions, the eye of wisdom is mentioned. So don't come running at me and saying, oh, that's an esoteric teaching out of Hinduism. No. All the seers, when they were living, there was no such thing as Christianity. There's no Christianity when Christ lived. There was no Buddhism when Buddha lived. They were just wandering free souls, sannyasins who knew the truth. They were walking Bibles, walking Qurans, walking Upanishads. They were God walking around on 2 legs. And by the way, that's According to Vivekananda, the only God you will find here on earth is the one on two legs. Otherwise, you're looking for God in all the wrong places. And we've been doing that from time out of mind, turning God into angels and children and animals and celestials and names and forms, when God can never be made into a name and a form. It's always formless. So Vivekananda said, therefore you're going to have to give up that tendency that wants to bring God down to your comfort zones, and you're going to have to bring yourself up to God. The human must become divine. The jiva must become Shiva. And must realize that it always was Shiva. That might not happen until it finally does get enlightenment, but in the meantime, what is enlightenment? There are magazines out saying that. What is enlightenment? If you ask me, quit asking the question. The answer is there in the scriptures. I just chanted it when I started out. Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagad Cha. The final conclusion of the Vedanta is that all this is Brahman. Time, space, living being in the world. But living in constant recognition of that fact is what is called enlightenment. If you forget that fact, then you're plunged into ignorance the same day you got a moment of enlightenment. You've got to keep it up. You have to keep up that ideal. You have to raise yourself to that ideal and hold it. Everyone needs an ideal here. If your ideal is science, fine, but make the right conclusion. Buddha made the conclusion that all was empty here. Shunyata. 550 years before Christ was born. So 2,500 years later in your advanced physical science, you're going to find the object to be vibrating at a billionth of a second and not make a conclusion that it's empty? Everything you look at is empty. And it's empty at three levels. Basically, first you're looking at the appearance of the thing, and it's not what it really is. That's Maya. Second, you're looking at the swirling particle thing, and you can't really see that. And third, you're looking at the Buddha nature essence behind everything. That too happens to be empty, but it's not empty of compassion. It's not empty of virtue. It's not empty of essence. It's empty of name and form, that's all. Name and form's an illusion. You can never know an object. It's impossible to know an object. Partly because it came out of your own mind. It's a projection. So, with the rule of thumb, with the yogis, those are the rules of the meaning of an object. I've shown you that chart before. So, we raise ourselves up out of these kinds of ignoble actions that cause others suffering. And we get knowledge to make a living. And then pretty soon we give that up, and we give up pleasure-seeking and power, because, as Vivekananda said, a perfect world is a contradiction in terms. It's like saying hot ice. A perfect world's never going to happen. So you might as well just accept it as it is, and that's the first noble truth of the Buddha. There is suffering. If you can't accept there is suffering here, and that it's a part of the creation, then you can't be a Buddhist. What are these pleasure-seeking people running around in the name of Vedantas and Buddhism and other religions, Christianity and so forth, as if the world were their oyster? Christ wanted you to renounce it. Buddha said it was full of suffering. Holy Mother said, may you never be born again here. My teacher's teacher. May you never be born again here. Birth and death are very miserable. May you never have to experience them again. He wasn't one of those ma's running around nowadays. Come here, I'll hug you, everything's okay. No, it's not okay. And I'm here to tell you so. You're walking a very precarious edge here when you get into the body. And there's suffering in store for you at all levels. So you need to defend yourself. As they've been talking about that strange expression, armed to the teeth. Right? That probably came from the pirates, you see. When they were swinging over to the next ship, they had a dagger, and they had a musket, and they had a sword. They probably had another dagger stashed here. They had one in their teeth too, you see. So when they swang over to that other ship, they were armed to the teeth. And that's what you need to be when you swing over to the ship of the world, you see. Because we even sing that, don't we? Gunahina sutan aparadayutan kripayadya samudara mohagatan tarnim bhava sagara parakarim pranamami param Jananim Jagatam Do thou this day save thy children bound in Maya's chains. Increase virtue, take vice away, destroy all blemishes with the power of thy name. For thine is the only ship to carry across this earthly sea. Therefore, O Mother of the worlds, be our salutations ever unto thee. Swami Abhedananda, one of Ramakrishna's disciples, whose picture is there on the mantle, with the other 15. So thine is the only ship to ferry across this earthly sea, so you better be armed to the teeth when you come to this ship, and seek out that ship that is sailing by a pole star, by a good guide, you see. Divine Mother being our guide. So, beyond intellectual for mere pleasure seeking and power, you go to scholarship for fame. You want to transcend that. You put your wife's name on that constellation up there that you discovered, and she divorces you and then causes you to brood. When you brood, you thicken the curtain of nations, you see. And fear and doubt and ignorance are on the wax, you see. And peace of mind is on the wane. It's waning, it's waning. It's usually, in Portland, it's usually waning. As soon as I see Lokanath, I start cracking jokes, you see. He just came in. That's the only way we can get over our intellectual problems, is he and I, is like to laugh, right? Our mind spends too much time up there. Come down. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, come down, mother. Come down. The top of his head, because it was always in the crown chakra area. Well, if you get to jnana, it's divided into pavriti and nivriti. And in the middle there is just pure good old jnanam. See, that's knowledge of God. Not knowledge of the worlds and of other things, or even son of a barren woman knowledge, you see. But it's real knowledge. It starts with preoccupation with facts, figures, goes on ascending by gathering information for ego gratification. Pretty soon you want to take it to yourself. The intellect is not quite ripe yet. It's not honed. The ego element is still a part of it. Remember, we mentioned the 24 cosmic principles, and 4 of them were that fourfold mind. And that consists of thought, ego, intelligence, and dual mind. So you see what kind of an amalgam that is, all mixed up. So you want to look at each one of those things in the art of Atmavichara, self-analysis, and look at intellect, and if it's really honed yet, and how much it's under the influence of ego. And if the ego can let it go, you see, let it be mother's wisdom, and you just borrow it, as Ramakrishna did. And also, if the thoughts are in accordance with that intelligence, because the mind can take fine flights of fancy to these high levels, and then it comes a rough draft of sin's wind will blow the kite of the mind back to earth, you see. And you can't hold that standard yet and keep it with a default zone. And then there's also that dual mind itself. Dual mind is nicely defined by saying good and bad, pleasure and pain, virtue and vice, life and death, form and formlessness. A whole set of dualities that you can contemplate from the very basest, joy and sorrow, all the way to the very subtlest, bondage and liberation. And everything that falls in between. That's also what either thickens or unthickens that curtain of nescience that's keeping you from knowing yourself, that cloud of unknowing. So that's getting thinned out as you begin to take this. And probably right there is the pivotal point. Knowledge utilized for altruistic motives. When people start to get selfless and give up their selfishness, then altruism acts as a great purifier, until it sees the limitations of altruism too. There was one story, Swami Brahmananda, whose birthday was last week, he celebrated it in San Francisco. Man came in, sat down for a meeting. The man started talking, went on for 20 minutes about everything he wanted to do for Calcutta. He wanted to build new sewer systems, he wanted to build dispensaries and hospitals and take the poor off the streets and get them in housing, on and on like this. Finally, there was just a little bit of a silence. And Swami Brahmananda said, "Oh my, what did God ever do before you were born?" Ego went, pops. So, Ramakrishna used to put it this way: if you want a lot of things and you get an audience with God, then the minute you see God, you'll forget all those things that you wanted. When you see that innate perfection, that scintillating beauty, Chintaya mama manasa hari. The beauty of hari is just captivating, and it just takes you immediately into the realm of spirituality, and there are no problems there. There was a edifice called the Ochterlony Monument in Calcutta. We were just there last month, and so if you go up the Ochterlony Monument, you go up really high, and pretty soon all the people just look like little figures. See, so Ramakrishna said, it's like taking a hot air balloon, all the problems of the world there, and you go up and people are just like ants and there's no problems. Everything has gone away. So that's what it's like to have this kind of elation, and this equanimity and bliss that comes from it. And you just are always elevated until you're walking around the world like that. And when you are walking around the world like that, then you become a blessing on society without even trying. You're bringing peace and joy into the lives of others. Sri Ramakrishna said there are many, many divine couples, Shiva Shakti, amongst the householders, but they're hardly seen. They're always in the back, but they're always casting blessings on the society. So if you were to go beyond altruism, probably one of the signs, we see it in this culture nowadays, is you begin reading spiritual books. One of the rules about food is that hopefully you get out of reading a murder mystery while you're eating, or keeping the Gita in the same shelf as other worldly books. You get this discrimination process going. And so when you sit to eat, food is God, and you take that into you, and that gives you mukhya prana, good energy, and mukhya prana, with the power of mantra and sadhana, gets taken up the spine and refined, and you don't just become a healthy person, but you begin to actually know the meaning of Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagna, Brahmanahutam. It's all this fire. Food is being taken up and giving you higher states of consciousness. It all begins with food. Even Krishna even says that in the Gita. Vedas, sacrifice, rain, all that. Food is the basis. So that happens, and you begin getting ojas, or this spiritual energy, and then tejas, it shines out your pores. They call an aura nowadays. They saw in Buddha and Christ and others. Is actually just refined food, really. It's all prana, but the prana that started out in a gross sense became that prana by which man does not live alone, and that became a mechanism, or a vahana, a vehicle, to get you into a spiritual state and hopefully keep you there. So you have to observe those rules around food. They're not just etiquette. Let's put out a book about how to pick up what fork and everything, but not say anything about the value of food and the mental asana that you have to adopt. Let's get out of this physical asana problem, people. Let's start using mental asana, because one position is what you need to get into yoga. I mean, the father of yoga says so. So get that position, get done with your physical asana, and start adopting mental asanas. In fact, it would be better for you the next time you're born to come here already prepared with mental asanas. Because that's what you're seeing when you see the Tibetan lamas or the Zen Buddhist roshis or the Hindu swamis. Mostly people who came here with mental asana already mastered. And some of those householders, couples, divine couples among householders too, they had it all set up. Anterior to life and mind is the Atman. They all had it set up before the actual manifestation process started. Remember, the manifestation process is going on all the time in cycles that never end. It's not like you can think back to a beginning. It's an eternal moment. It's just a matter of whether you call that eternal moment the present or the eternal moment. Past, present, and future are three modes of time. People are saying, oh, I live in the present, I live in the present. But where did the eternal moment go? That's what I'd like to know. That knowledge that knows 4,320,000,000 year cycles, one lifetime, one day of waking, dreaming, and sleeping, and one breath are the same thing. Where's that knowledge? Let's say Vivekananda could sit, Holy Mother said, in a formless state for 700 years like a wooden statue. But what's 700 years in meditation? Might as well be an hour. Time is that illusory. So you begin to get that kind of information from reading spiritual books. And so that's usually kind of the introduction to spirituality that people get. They're beginning to border on Jnanam, whether they know it or not. And then pretty soon they're getting towards that Nivritti Jnanam, that Jnanam that will make you want to renounce all things unhealthy. Touch not, even with your toes, anything that's uncanny. Who said that? Swami Vivekananda. Touch not anything uncanny, not even with your toes. So, get thee behind me is what Christ said. It's not like you're going to meet a horned fellow with a red complexion and a long tail and say, get thee behind me. It's all devilish things that you want to get behind you. Anything that limits you, keeps you from living a divine life or a dharmic life. Moral ethical life, not acceptable anymore. There's a new standard here that's been cut. We want to get to at least Dharma. And from Dharma we can get to Swadharma, or what the real reason we're here, the reason we came here. How many people uncover that? Or do they just end up saying, I don't know the meaning of my life. I don't know why I'm here, or where I came from, or where I'm going, or who I am. Why, what, when, where? The four confusing W's. But who will define it for you? You'll begin to put a finger on the culprit, see, because you'll never know who you are until you know what you're not. And that's why people can sit for 20, 30 years in meditation and never even have mastered concentration yet. What to speak of pratyahara? Because they don't know what they're not yet. They're mixing it up. The soul's married to nature, and it hasn't got its divorce yet on the high court of Advaita. From the great judge, Lord Brahma. I have a contention with her. I want a divorce, you see. Let's go beyond nature, get beyond matter, and get into some of these eternal verities which science cannot explain and which Western psychology can never explain until it gets out of its one lifetime scenario box. See, Freud and Jung never had a Hindu man on the table. They were Europeans. So they never saw a person sit up and say, what are you talking about, Mr. Jung? I've had many lifetimes. There's a new thought for you. Put that in your pipe. Puff on that a while. So if you get into this level, then you begin to study the scriptures, because those spiritual books are pointing you towards an essence. Vidya Shastra. And better for you if you know the difference between fundamentalist scriptures and non-dual scriptures. That's how Lord Vashishta puts it right off the bat. In fact, he says that's the first step in real spiritual life, is to know the difference between dualistic or fundamentalist scriptures and non-dual scriptures. It's not that you have to just know one and not know the other. It's that you have to be like an ant. Take the sugar and leave the sand, if you're talking about the dualistic scriptures. But you won't find the necessity of being an ant in those non-dual scriptures. It's just reading out the truth of you, about yourself, to yourself. And everything that you're not gets conveniently put aside. Get thee behind me, and you know who you are. What you're not is not a problem anymore. Curtain of nescience immediately thins down and becomes transparent, and you get transcendent. Spend a good amount of time like that every day. Don't forget to go there. And don't ever convince yourself that it's not available to you. Shankara said, you must practice having samadhi. And Ramakrishna, if he epitomizes anything to us nowadays, is the ability of a man to have samadhi. Call him what you like, saint, seer, holy man, ordinary man. But he had samadhi, and he had a whole dearth of samadhi, so he's telling you that at least. See? Where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. That's samadhi, all three of them. There's a knowledge samadhi, there's a truth samadhi, there's a bliss samadhi. Finally, there's a samadhi of your ego. And your ego's not going to like that samadhi. Let's put it that way. The ego's going to go away. Well, if you can rise to such a level, you can teach spiritual disciplines to others, to sincere aspirants. We are studying this Shvetashvatara Upanishad today, and the second half I'll get into the actual slokas. But basically, its very, very last slokas in chapter 6 says, do not give these teachings to an unworthy disciple, or to an insincere son, or to worldly people. Give these only to noble aspirants. So there's your mental asana again. People who are ready and prepared and qualified, you give them that truth, and it's just a matter of moment. That truth is like acid, and it burns through everything. Minor things quickly, and deeper samskaras take a little longer, but it will burn through everything. It's the most corrosive substance in the world, in all the worlds. And its vehicle, its vahana, is higher wisdom. So take spiritual disciplines, transmit the teachings to help and free others, begin to worship in a non-dual way. It's not like when you get wisdom, worship goes away, it intensifies. Love is the final result, but love isn't truly love until the mind gets purified by knowledge. The God of love says that in the Gita. Nahi gyanena sadrishyam pavitramiha vijite. The most highest and best purifier of all is knowledge. If you have knowledge, then you'll know how to love, who to love, when to love, where to love, why to love. All the W's get their justification in the highest love. That's called Prema Bhakti. Radha had it for Krishna. Kind of turned her into a mess. Like Sri Ramakrishna too. He had the highest bhakti. Can't manage your affairs very well. So come down to bird flies high, but it has to come rest on a branch once in a while. Make sure you don't rest on the roots. Come down and rest on the higher branches of yoga. Keep yourself a default zone. Keep up the ideal, and then pretty soon that will become natural to you. A little bit hard, you see, when you first come to the teachings, to measure yourself to Guru, Dharma, and Sangha. And you struggle and you fall, and you struggle and you fall. You try and keep your torch lit, and it goes out. But then pretty soon you have a sort of default zone, and you've practiced it long enough, and pretty soon that becomes natural to you. And what is unnatural is everything that went before. In other words, I woke up in the morning one day, and my ignorance was gone, utterly gone. Because who can contain the truth? Who can keep a blazing fire tied in a cotton cloth? Poof! See, truth is going to awaken. The most corrosive substance in the world, as they're saying. So that ignorance will go away, and you'll be able to worship in a non-dual way. Like my teacher was saying at one of the correctional institutions just yesterday. As he used to say, basically, offer flowers in front of the deity or speak Advaita on the podium. It was the same to him. It was his eternal moment. His eternal moment had its manifestation of about 94 years here on earth with us. Now, the compassionate use of wisdom to remove suffering. Let's just not go around saying, let's remove the suffering of all beings, because Buddha's first truth was there is suffering. So let's not get this wrong. Let's remove the unnecessary suffering and acknowledge the necessary suffering, and then forbear it and gain strength and build character so that suffering won't bother us anymore. Just like we had to acclimatize to that higher wisdom, we have to acclimatize too to levels of suffering. Suffering that was once, a poisonous snake bite will turn into a mere mosquito bite. We'll be able to bear it easily. Even physical suffering can be borne more easily if the mind just simply leaves the body alone. It's an art. Might not be so popular with the current hatha yogis and food faddists and so forth, but basically the idea Vivekananda expressed it was that the only proof of you being not matter is to leave matter alone. Quit dabbling around with it. See, to the nth degree we see science dabbling around with it. And then people who aren't very scientifically minded, they're indiscriminately mixing with matter, with nature, with pleasures and so forth, trying to dominate over nature, therefore over other countries and so forth. And then you're fallen, you see. Even if you look good, you're still falling to a low level. So this ideal that we want to keep is more in keeping with holding that high ideal, using wisdom compassionately to destroy ignorance, and leaving alone the six transformations. And both Buddhism and Vedanta agree. One calls it the six billows, the other calls it the six transformations. Birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. Those are the painful things. And yes, growth is one of them, in case you haven't noticed. You may have grown up pretty easily on the lap of luxury, as Vivekananda says, but you get into spiritual company, you'll find out how hard it is to grow. In meditation, in service of others, those are difficult things indeed. And sitting and listening to Babaji speak for 3 hours, difficult. Or even increasing your devotion. You see, I feel dry, I don't really love God. I feel hollow when I bow before an image, you see. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jew. This doesn't work for me. See. So it's very hard to increase one's devotion to God if you don't understand that God is both with form and beyond form. Not either or. Choose your way, with form or without, and stick to it. But never think that your way is the only right way. You must keep the universal spirit. That's true religion. Then, if you can do that, you can combine devotion and wisdom at the highest level. See? And the mother of wisdom is just waiting for you there. Come, my child. Come, my child. She sings to you all along the way. Vishayam kusumam parihrecha sada charanya bruhamrita shanti sudam piba bringamano bhavarogaharam pranamami param jananim jagatam. Means Vishayam kusumam parihricha sada means renounce my mind be. Bzz, be. Renounce my mind be the sense flowers of this earth. Drink instead the nectar of Mother's lotus feet. Enjoy thus in peace and in mirth. Then in charm of delusion shalt thou cease to be. O great Mother of the worlds, be my salutations ever. So in peace and in mirth. Prema mudita manase kaho Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram. Mudita, you see, that's what excitement and happiness turn into, and that very joy will turn into higher wisdom and equanimity. Then you'll be like an elephant walking into an ocean rather than into a small pool. If you see an elephant walk into a small village pool, waves and riot, you see confusion, people running for their lives, get out. Or others saying, surf's up. But if an elephant walks into an ocean, nothing. So the joy of a great soul is like an ocean. Something pleases him, no movement on the face. Something aggravates him, no movement on the face. See, it's just one deep pool of equanimity. Samatva, or upekshanam, Buddhism and Vedanta call them. Well, the only place to go after being able to combine wisdom, devotion, and meditation in service is to acquire direct spiritual experience. The more you sit in the rare combination of the four yogas, the more you will get direct spiritual experience, as rare as hen's teeth in this world. And from all the hens I've talked to, those are pretty rare. I said, oh, my grandmother might have had them. I said, but she's stew now. So direct spiritual experience is called nididhyasana, or anubhava, or different words in Sanskrit. Those are very important to, that's where Sri Ramakrishna pretty much starts off in the gospel. And don't assume just because he says mere book learning that the scriptures aren't important. But assume more that you must take that spiritual wisdom you get from books and from temples, and especially from the teachers, the acharyas, the preceptors, and transmute it into direct spiritual experience. That happens by manana, rolling it over in your mind for a while, see, and then distilling an essence out of it. You can actually work on that on your pilgrimage and so forth. See, people take people on pilgrimage. For the last 20 years, I've taken them on several dozen pilgrimages. Some people have the tendency to go running after experiences. Some people stay back and just milk the most out of that one experience they happen to be having at the time. See, so there's a great art of being able to slow down everything and extract the essence of your experiences and end up with something definitive in the end. And it's the same at the end of your life. You end up with some extraction of your experiences that are definitive, that are a sort of foundation for your next lifetime. Your next lifetime being lived in more light, more spirituality, more dharma, until finally you break the chain of birth and death. O snapper of this world's chains, the song they sing about Sri Ramakrishna. O snapper of this world's chains. What Vivekananda talked about later, when he said, he'd then know more how karma lives and goes. His task is done, let karma float it down. There is but one, the free knower self, without a stain, without a name or form. That kind of freedom, an eternal freedom. Well, these two charts, this one we saw last week, this one we revisit, but I wanted to show you some charts about Lord Brahma, because those are the slokas in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad that we are approaching when we approach chapter 5. We'll read those slokas after the break, but in the meantime this will be a sort of precursor to your slokas. And basically, you see here two different representations of Lord Brahma. Let's look at this one on your right first. You see there, Lord Brahma, unto him was imparted the supreme wisdom of Brahman. Remember, when you say the word Brahma in Sanskrit, there are three forms of it: Brahma, Brahman, and Brahmin. Brahmin is the priest, Brahman is the absolute reality without form, and Brahma is the Trinity, one of the Trinity. Talking about Brahma here, the one through whose great mind came this, transmitted this wisdom, and this wisdom turned into the worlds. So all these worlds are your own intelligence. That's the essence behind the thing, not the appearance or the swirling particle reality, sub-reality, but the actual essence behind the thing is that wisdom turned into an object that you must see. So Brahma is Atman, Brahman is prana. There's Atman at the very highest level, and prana down there at food, and everything that goes in between is one Brahman. He represents both the life and death of the gods. He controls them and the jivas, embodied souls, through his prana, which belongs to the nadis. You know, the Kundalini Shakti flows up the 6 centers, right? And out of those 6 centers, there are hundreds and thousands of subtle nerves. If you want to go about it from the outside, from the inside out, then those subtle nerves will turn into gross nerves, and those gross nerves will be your body. So you're a walking testament to the kingdoms of heaven within. Now you know why Vivekananda said mankind is just God walking around on 2 legs, because when they look at you, they think, look at those hundreds and thousands of nadis that soul is connected to inside, along which flows the prana, and which will take their soul to different lokas after death. So when we say mankind is divine, we're not just coming up with some nice catchphrase to try and impress you or to inspire you towards realization of it, because the fact is already matter. Really, the victory's already won. You just have to claim it. That's how Advaita Vedanta would put it. You just have to claim it. So there's a way of claiming that. The yogis would say through the nadis. You see all of this prana flowing everywhere. Its sign is everywhere outwardly, but take it from outward inward, and you'll find this whole network of nerves, hundreds and thousands of them, that are taking you into deep sleep tonight, to the great light when you pass away, and bringing you back too into the gross nadis through the subtle nadis. India's known about this for millennia before Christ. Therefore they don't argue about where a soul comes from and where it goes, or how many souls there are in existence. Those are futile. Those are vexing speculation. There's an infinite amount of them, and they're beginningless and endless, and they come and they flow constantly through this network of subtle nerves, and the vehicle is the prana. So Lord Brahma is the master of that. He's got a 1,000-petal lotus there, doesn't he? He sits on. So that means every petal is a world. That is a loka with many worlds in it. Just like this one loka here has many physical worlds in it, those internal worlds also have many, many, many subtle worlds and causal worlds in them. And he's the one that has projected it all through his great mind. So in dreamless sleep, souls pass through the state into their own abode. Can't put it any clearer than that. First mentions the nadis, mentions the prana, mentions the overseer, the archetypical soul, and then how beings penetrate through and follow that, like a falcon piercing the sky to rest in its own nest. Might as well put a little poetic thing on the end there, you see, to sweep in all of our temperaments, you see. There's some attracting power. Starting here, only those who get attached to pleasure do work for the sake of its fruits. Though really the master of the senses, they become bound and take various forms, wandering constantly along the 3 pathways as a result. There's the 3 pathways. The Tiryan Marga, path of lower births, down towards the worlds of name and form. The Pitriyana, the path of the fathers and the ancestors, which Krishna says, stay in one place, revolving all the time. this falls, this stays in the place, revolves, and this tends to aspire. Devayana, the path of the gods. So there's a number of souls, see, an infinite number of souls who are wandering, samsara pragbara, along this stream of cycles all the time and cannot get out for your 4,320,000,000 years or your many yugas. They're along for the ride, you might say. Slow boat to China. But then there's a transcendent reality, Kaivalya pragbara, which happens to souls who get divorced from nature. Kaivalya means separation from nature. It's its best definition in English. Father of Yoga used it to describe that penultimate state just before one gets samadhi. You will have to separate from name and form. If you imagine Buddha sitting under the Bo tree and finally getting his nirvana, just before that he said he saw the ancestors, he saw the three paths, he saw the river of time, he looked at the river of time and saw it arc, just like you would see the ocean arc if you were on a high Himalayan mountain. You see, oh, you begin to think that, gee, maybe the world is round, not flat. Same with time. If you got high enough in a transcendent state of mind, you see that time also arcs out there somewhere, and it begins to come around. Then you start to think, well, maybe this is all cyclic, no matter how long I measure it in terms of years, or yugas, or Lord Brahma's day or night, which is, even one of his blinks is very long for us. To speak of his day and night, one of his breaths very long. So that continuum, if you're sitting here and say, how marvelous, there's a witness to this, I think I can get off. I've been on the merry-go-round long enough. I'm dizzy. I'm even nauseous. I think I'll get off. I've been in the bathtub long enough. I'm wrinkled. Old age. I think I'll get out. I'm clean now. So you can just almost taste the way a soul would, like that, would feel once he reached Kaivalya. And he would say, I will now separate myself from Lord Brahma. Here's your creation, Lord. Take it. It's beautiful, really. It's a mixed bag, though. I'm out of here. And there's even slokas in the Upanishads about souls handing the creation back to Brahma. In fact, in our own Shvetashvatara Upanishad, I can read it to you after, in our second half. It says, until a man can roll up the sky like a skin, there's no hope for him for freedom outside of realization of Brahman. That's how impossible it would be to get freedom without spiritual striving. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, because we now have come to a period for our break. The live streaming audience can see a few of these charts while we're taking our break. So let's take 10 or 15 minutes here and come back. Thank you.
Okay.
Got that same pose right now. We are live. Well, you caught us in our mirth. Sorry, live streaming audience, but we are having fun here in our own Vedantic way. And that's Upanishadic fun, by the way. Vedanta equals Upanishad. Upanishad being the fourth portion of the Vedas, and where the most of the non-dual wisdom was collected and concentrated upon over maybe a 500-year period, that was captured and saved by Vedavyas. Therefore he earned the nice title of Father of Vedanta because he saved these Upanishads, at least 108 of them, at the end of a yuga, you might say. And some of them were probably lost, like many of the Sankhya scriptures too. So we're very fortunate to have what is left, and those are what's called the Sanatana Dharma scriptures. They're those eternal scriptures which India insists are without beginning, middle, and end. Easy to say that since everything else is also without beginning, middle, and end to them. But nevertheless, part of that eternal scripture that we were talking about on that march from lower truth to higher truth. And then at the break, just before the break, we got into discussing the Trinity, which is a very high level of consciousness, no doubt. The projection, the sustenance, and the withdrawal of things. That's why, as to further explain what I was talking about earlier in the class, it's not so much about births, lives, and deaths, or beginnings, middles, and ends, and all that, but it's more like arising, appearing, and falling. Like waves on an ocean, where nothing happens except the assuming of a form and the giving it up. So that's one of the way which Buddhists and Vedantists explain about this phenomena, of which there is an eternal witness, as we chanted at the beginning of the class, Sakshi Bhutam, the witness of all phenomena. So those waves that rise are consisting of water. They may not be the whole ocean, but they might as well be. The meaning being that you can meditate on God with form and realize your connection, and then you can also transcend God with form. That's precisely what Lord Brahma would want you to do. Whether it's Divine Mother sitting there waiting for you to ascend to that position, or whether it's Lord Brahma with the Om sign engraved on his hand telling you, Om, the word, is where you will come after you pass me. We will pass into the word, which is a porthole to formlessness. It's also, if you reverse it, the porthole back into form, and so everything is coming in and out of the word. Does it sound familiar? In the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God. I'm sure Christ knew that even before he visited India, if he was supposed to have done so. Nevertheless, hard for John to understand that when Christ told it to him. Better go to Gethsemane and meditate on that, because you need to know these building blocks of the universe, not just the universe of name and form externally, but the inner universe. Is very important to put together those connections. And if you have gravitated so far out that you don't know the connection yet between smell and earth and water and taste and fire and sight, then those things should be made obvious to you again by your own meditations, by your own ruminations. And then you may connect the dots to a deeper and deeper level until finally you would find the Trinity, which is those slokas that we are encountering in chapter 5 of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Shvetashvatara is one of the more recent of the ancient Upanishadic rishis. So his Upanishad is very understandable to us when he says things like, Thou art the green parrot with red eyes, thou art the old man tottering along on his staff. He puts it in such a way that it goes right to the heart and still appeals to the intellect. Those two paths again of wisdom and devotion that need to be fused and that aren't antagonistic to each other whatsoever. Whoever thought of that idea was making a departure from the realization of the great souls. So these slokas that we encounter at the beginning of chapter 5 state this: ignorance leads to the perishable, wisdom leads to immortality. Entirely different from these is He, the imperishable One, infinite, secret, the Supreme Brahman, in whom exists wisdom as well as ignorance, and who governs them both. So, like a snake and its poison, Brahman is both full of wisdom and also full of suffering, and therefore there is an aspect that is transcendent to both. So they want you to know that. What is ignorance leads to the perishable, and what is wise leads to immortality. But beyond both is that one Brahman that would contain both in it. And that's why I started out with that chart, so we would see how to gravitate out of ignorance, whichever pathway we took. And there's actually images there of the 7 chakras that I found in Nepalese museum. This is actually a series of photographs I had to take because the thing was so long. I had to put them together in Photoshop, but they show each chakra in that way of thinking in Nepal way back in 700, 800 AD. Also, we looked at it in terms of ignorance and wisdom being contained in the same Brahman in that sense, whether you call it avidya, paravid, or paramadvaita, or ajnana, jnana, and vijnana, and brahmajnana. You see that it's all really thought of as contained in one Supreme Brahman. Or as Sri Ramakrishna used to clarify for us, good and bad smells pass on the air, but the air only carries them. It's not ultimately affected by them. That would be even more true of ether, holding objects, but not being affected in the least. Like I can move this book and air will be displaced, but ether stays the same. So ether is one of the best of all contemplatable alambanas, that is, things in the physical world that you meditate on that point towards Brahman. A station for meditation. You have to have a station for it, or else you might just wander, like I say, even for 10 or 20 years without really, and just say, well, yeah, I have a meditation practice, but where did it get you? So you take some foundation. Meditate. It could be earth, air, fire, water, and ether. It could be senses. It could be the ego. And then, of course, it could be the cosmic ego, the Trinity. You'll be getting different levels of realization out of each of those respective meditations. So they're a wide open book to you. I mean, they're a periphery that you can craft an inner life out of. And otherwise you're missing out on the bulk of the iceberg, and you only know the tip. The tip's constantly melting, by the way, and more is coming up, so it's very confusing to get focused on just that. Now, second sloka says, because that had to do with ignorance and wisdom and what was beyond it, ushers in Lord Brahma, and as a comparison to Lord Brahman, to the Supreme Brahman, then there's Brahma, the Creator. As we used to say, the light of Brahman filters through the Trinity and turns into the worlds, but the Trinity stands with their back to that light. If they were ever to turn, then they would merge into it, and there would be a new Brahma, a new Vishnu, and a new Shiva would have to come and take their place. That's at the end of a very, very long period of time that would happen. Otherwise, they will hold this station as the Trinity for an infinitely long period of time, called Yuga, Mahayuga, Manvantara, Shvetashvatara Manvantara of all things. They even named the longest cycle after him, as it were, or beings of his like. So those periods of time then, very vast, but just like them, at some point, although we don't have to wait that long, we can turn away from the refracted and reflected light of things, of objects and so forth, and turn to the original. Beautiful song in India says, turn your face to the original, your own self. You've wandered around these worlds far too long. And songs sung about that, poems written. So that means then Sloka 2 shifts all of a sudden. He alone presides over nature in all its aspects and controls every form and every cause of production. He witnesses the birth of the firstborn seer of golden color. The word for that is Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha means like a cosmic egg. So that's floating in the womb of the mother, as it were, as we see here. See, here's the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva Trinity, and then here's the mother as the backdrop, the Mahashakti or Mahaprakriti, and she looks, as it were, out through the Trinity, and then back through her you reach things like Turiya or formless dynamism. Even the visionary level, is in that realm. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. I've added another, the visionary level between dreaming and deep sleep. I've been talking about it enough now that we can see that the higher dreams are visions, and they're just happening to you when you're coming out of deep sleep or when you're going into deep sleep. What's happening to you when you're coming out of dreaming into waking is called the 1,000 imbecilities of the mind. That's where you have these silly dreams. For me, it would be, just before I wake up, as I'm conducting a retreat and everyone's unruly. It's hard to keep everything together. But in my dream, I'm always trying to keep everyone together, and they're all doing strange things, talking and so forth. Herding cats. But, at least I'm not herding cats along with dogs. That would be a real mess. So that first seer of golden color and nourishes him with wisdom. So that cosmic soul, that Hiranyagarbha, can be called Brahma, the creator, this figure here, four-armed, four-faced Brahma. He looks in all directions, east, west, south, north, in and out, and his four arms hold the four Vedas, and then his four mouths chant the four Vedas, and whenever he sees her, he's constantly chanting these scriptures at her direction. So beautiful symbology involved in that. So one hardly knows which chart to go to first, but let's read a few of these slokas first that have to do with Lord Brahma. Differentiating each genus into its species, and each species into its members, the Supreme Being withdraws them once more into their own ground. That would be her, Mahaprakriti. Again, bringing forth the agents of creation, the Great Self holds sway over them all. That's slokas 1, 2, and 3 of chapter 5. Sloka 4 is, just as the sun shines, lighting up all of space, below and across, even so does that one adorable God, the repository of all goodness and greatness, preside over everything that has the nature of a cause. That's why I said in the beginning of the class, to us, our science is Sankhya, our psychology is yoga, and our spirituality is Vedanta. So that's what we base our whole life upon. We have a science, we have a psychology, and we have a philosophy that's spirituality. So in that way, it's all hooked back to the ancient Samkhya sciences, Kapila and all the way up to Asuri, his student, and on the way to century 1 AD, when Ishvara Krishna came forth with his most recent commentation of these Sankhya scriptures that helped save them, just like Vedas saved the Vedanta. We have this Samkhya science that's been taught all along, and it's got copious things in it. That's why Lokanath once told me, how do you know a Samkhya scientist? He speaks with a list. So these lists in Samkhya are copious. There's so many of them. The 24 cosmic principles are the main ones you need to know, but then there's the 10 tenets of Samkhya and other convenient ones. The ones that are quintessential, I think, have survived. But it presides over everything that is the nature of a cause. So cause and effect is very big in Samkhya and everything that's preceded and borrowed from Samkhya since. Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Buddhism, Vedanta, Yoga, incredibly influenced by that original Sankhya that was no doubt added onto by the Shaivites, 12 higher spandas, vibrational spheres, and objected to in some of its main tenets by the Advaitas, but nonetheless no one ever decried or forgot to give gratitude to that original homework that Kapila did, that set us all on a firm foundation of meditation on all that you're not. The ability to, because Shankara later said, that's the non-self he's talking about, and kind of made it easy for us to, hands off, as Vivekananda said, and get to the real, cut to the real chase, our Atman, our true nature, our Buddha nature. I'll read one more sloka and we'll look at this chart. That one who is the source of the world brings out everything from his own nature and leads creatures to perfection according to their deserts. That would, of course, be this nice rendering we just saw. And endows each being with its distinguishing characteristics. Thus he presides over the entire universe. He lies hidden in the Upanishads, which forms the essence of the Vedas. Him the Hiranyagarbha knows, that is, Lord Brahma knows, as the source of himself and the Vedas. These gods and seers who realize him in former days became identified with him and verily became immortal. So there's again the idea of the Trinity turning back and dissolving, everything soluble into that one formless reality. So those 6 slokas give us a good introduction to the difference between Brahman and Brahma. Lord Brahma just being a nice catch-all phrase right now for the entire Trinity, because what Brahma projects, Vishnu will come forward to sustain, and eventually Shiva will have to dissolve again. So that one Triputi and Trinity is very, very pivotal to understanding the difference between God with form and God beyond form, of which Ramakrishna says both are true. And many souls, for instance, here, the Bhakta feels that God is one entity and the world is another. Therefore, God reveals himself to him as a person. Up here, the Jnani, through his discrimination, realizes that the ego and the universe are both illusory and perceives Brahman in his own consciousness. So, sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. I'm not saying that you're always a Bhakti or else always a Jnani. We've already been saying that the paths of Bhakti and Jnana are coming together in an apex, right? And along the way they really resemble each other. So sometimes you feel like a Bhakta and sometimes you feel like a Jnani. I can speak from my own experience about that. But wave and a particle, there's different ways you can say that even in physics. But you also must say, if you're a standpoint of someone who's trying to share this wisdom with others after studying it for probably lifetimes, and or even if you take into just one lifetime scenario for about 45 years now, that Jnanam is what we need, not Hatha, and not Bhakti, unless that Bhakti is intensified and based on pure mind, because then we begin following things in the superfluous way. See, we need to purify the mind first, and then love will appear to us in everything. In other words, it's being veiled and it's being distorted, and we're taking various odd pictures of reality from different directions, like taking pictures on the way to the sun, and the sun all looks different depending on the position you're at. But when you have that purifying wisdom, then only can you meditate, then only can you love, then only can you do selfless service. So my particular position, my asana, and shared by the teachers I went to and many of the seers in the Upanishadic era in Buddhism, is that Jnanam has to be seen first, has to be grasped. When you come to that level, that cut, then you're beyond singing and dancing, you're beyond altruistic actions, and you're beyond the attempts at meditating, and you're actually then defining everything that is the non-self and setting it apart from the self. You're doing the discrimination process, because it's the wheat from the chaff, or you cannot gain a light and then hide it under a bushel. You have to know the distinction. No matter which religion you look at that, they were very much into this viveka, discrimination, which of course is the name of our great teacher who brought it to us. He called himself Ramakrishnananda first, but then Sashi wanted that, one of the boys there. So he said, okay, I'll call myself Satchidananda. He called himself that for a while, but then when he saw the world, he said, I better change that name to Vivekananda, the need for discrimination between the real and the unreal, because there's a very unholy matrimony underway here. and a very strange admixture of things. We need to give people back the ability to withdraw, to detach, to get dispassion, to get transcendence, to know that birds have nests and foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here. You can't hide, if you're a Christian, from this great axiom of renunciation. World-renouncing souls, and they're who we look to for spirituality, not Time magazine, see, just because they declare God is dead. Or Freud and Jung with their one lifetime scenario. Not going to work. God does not create unequally. I would not worship a God that did, Vivekananda said. Turns one into a genius and another into the fool at a whim. Capricious God. It's not my kind of God, sorry. So really, there must be one God here, and it's called human beings, and they must really revolve on one axis called karma. Action. And you look back into Sankhya Yoga, again, only Sri Krishna's version, chapter 3, Gita, to find out all of that. I'm sorry, chapter 2. Chapter 1 is the yoga of depression. So it's a very apropos scripture even for this day and age, in all ways. So that golden seer, that firstborn of golden color, is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, that trinity. And there you see them, and as represented as Brahma, and you see we've looked at the three paths, which this quote told us about. They revolve around these three paths, going up, going down, staying in the middle. But very hard to get to transcendent reality. What does it say there? Just so we understand a little bit. There, neither do worlds exist nor not exist. Neither do the Vedas and Devas exist or not exist. Devas are gods. Neither does the father and mother exist nor not exist. Only the one highest Brahman shines there. And that's why we sing about that. The Shankara sing about it, and we followed up on it. Namritshur na Shanka, Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva, Mata Majan Maha, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. Oh yes. So, Namrityur Nashanka, I have no birth or death. Napita Naiva Me Naiva Mata Majanma, I have no birth, no father, no mother. That's what the soul feels like. Transcend the ancestors, transcend the need to be reborn again out of desire. Come back, if you will, as a free soul. That's the only way you should come back. Make good choices during this life. Distill your experiences before the end. Take one deep out breath at the end. You see, let it go. And don't come back upside down with your mantra being wah, wah, wah. No more birth in the womb of matter for me, only emanation from my Divine Mother. So, as Ramprasad sings in his beautiful songs. So, transcendent reality, only one highest Brahman shines there, the light of Brahman. Beings see that, even ordinary beings see that. Some beings see it at the time of death and withdraw from it and come back to tell us about it. In a hospital or something. But what you need to do is see it in your deepest meditations. And before you see that, you probably want to see her. Before you see her, you might want to see the Trinity. And before you see the Trinity, you might want to examine your own intelligence. And before you see that, you might want to look at the ego. And before you see that, you might want to see the mind. And before you see that, you might want to look at everything the mind produced. That is, after it left to the cosmic level and got to the collective level and then went down to the individual level, your own mind, and then you see spilling forth seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, air, earth, fire, water, and ether, so forth and so on. See? God didn't create any of it, not unless you want to attribute it to the personal God. The impersonal God is a-create, Vivekananda said. He also said, when they asked him, well, should a man be reborn then? He said, I certainly hope he will not until he can do so in full consciousness. So when you see illumined souls coming back to earth, precious few in the West, most of them in India, Tibet, places like that now, it's because they've been concentrating on this eternal Dharma that we're teaching here. This is why we've brought it to the West. It's why he brought it to the West, why we continue on teaching it. It's of utmost importance. It's crucial. It's essential. You cannot do without it. So what to speak of credit cards? Do not leave home without this. Unless it's to come to the ashram and learn more about it. Which is why we're struggling to keep ashrams here in the West. If you might notice from the 80s when I used to go around and teach at many of them, most of them are gone now. Not a popular notion. And monasteries have had a very hard time too. The Christian monasteries are almost all but gone. And, pardon me, but the church is different than the Christian monastery. Just like Hinduism is different than from Vedanta. It's good to be born in a church, he said, but don't die in one. Don't die in one. Take this religion and make it living. And the Vedanta is the candidate for that, highest candidate. So, very important we keep it going. On this chart you see he has 4 states. It's a good way of looking at your own consciousness and reality as well. In the waking state he is Brahma. In the dreaming state he is Vishnu. In the deep sleep state he is Rudra. That's Shiva. And in the 4th state he is the supremely indestructible one. Brahma Upanishad. So they call the 4 states of consciousness. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. It's a beautiful addition to the whole picture. That is non-denominational. One amazing thing at the Seattle retreat last weekend, I had taught all these things. I was pulling out these charts, and we looked at the Samkhya Acharyas, and we looked at various things. At the end of the 3 days, I said, have they mentioned God at all? Has Buddhism, Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga mentioned God at all? Hardly at all. It was completely non-denominational, hands-off. The only time God would come in would be Lord Brahma, and they just call him Mahat. So that's what I'm saying. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya, the 4 states of your consciousness. Am I trying to convince you that God exists or doesn't exist? Isn't it kind of a moot point anyway? There, neither do worlds exist, nor do they not exist. Neither do the Father exist, nor the Mother exist. There is only Brahman, the indivisible, the eternal, the all-pervasive. So it's a beautiful, very amenable philosophy that we propose, many-sided, like Brahma's 4 faces, and inclusive of so many other darshanas, clear ways of seeing, very poetically put and very convincing as to quote the Upanishads about them. These are truths that are very easily digestible for people, especially who have gotten tired of being born and dying in a church too many times. Whether you call the church the religious institution or the church of the world or the church of science, too many times I've been born and died in that, and now I want the truth, because thou shalt know the truth, and truth shall set you free. Even if you've never studied the Bible, everyone seems to know that phrase. So, inside of that, the Brahma Upanishad goes on, and I found some beautiful teachings out of it. And in the Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad, you see, of the 108 Upanishads, we have about 11 that were commented on. The 108 were saved by Vedavyasa in an earlier age, but 11 of those were commented on by Shankara, to me only because that's about all the time he had in 32 years that he lived, plus all else he did. So they're called the major Upanishads for some reason, and the other 99 are called minor. But as I look into the minor Upanishads, because 3 years ago I told you this is going to be the year of the Upanishad, we're going to start here looking into the minor ones. So since I'm not with you every day and all the time, my way of looking into that is to show you these charts with quotes out of the minor Upanishads. So Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad, the secret of Mother Saraswati. See, there she is. Only we found this at the Ramakrishna order. Now they've taken Saraswati and put Sharda there. Now Sharda's sitting and playing the veena, you see. So it works because Sharda is a name of Saraswati, and Saraswati is the most ancient of all goddesses. They call her Himavat, mother of the beautiful snow mountains. She goes way, way back into Vedic scripture, very early on. Umavati, Himavati, Saraswati. So Sharda is a name, the infinite pool of wisdom, the mother of wisdom. See, so anyway, they say in the Brahma Upanishad, you might like to hear this. 5 factors are there in her. We're talking about her then now. Shining, loving, being, shining, loving, form and name. The first 3 pertain to Brahman. The other 2 constitute the world. Leave aside the last 2 and be intent on the former 3. Whether inside or out, practice concentration. Now, at the retreat, we asked the question, does anyone know what that means, being, shining, loving? We waited about a minute, and then one person, remaining unnamed, came up with the answer. Satchidananda, right. And you only know that because he came up with the answer. Pure being, pure shining, pure loving, because being is Sat, existence, and shining is intelligence, it shines, loving is Ananda. So there's a simple way of putting that name for God, Satchidananda, a name for Brahman, not name for Brahma necessarily, but for Brahman. So he said, take those to yourself, name and form, put those behind. So the teaching is that she always has the swan in front of her, which is the pure white soul. The peacock is the glitter of the world. She has that behind her. So usually if you see those icons of Saraswati, she has a swan in front and the peacock behind. Or if she wants to just, entertain herself, she might bring the peacock forward for a minute. But the swan is always there. This is a beautiful thing out of the same Upanishad. Dearest mother, greatest goddess, Saraswati, female swan among the cluster, before the faces of the 4-faced God, that's of course Brahma, may the all-white Saraswati sport forever in my mind. Spouse of Brahma, whose thick tresses deck the crescent moon, thou art the stream of nectar that extinguishes samsara's heat. Very nice sloka from the Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad. Rahasya means secret. Now, to finish off this chart, then we could do this fast, this last sloka here. He who is the one source of all the worlds brings forth everything from his own sattvic nature and leads all beings to perfection according to their own karmas, while endowing each with its distinguishing characteristics. You might recognize that as that sloka we just read in chapter 5. Each genus into each species and so forth. So we've looked at that chart in full. Let's see what else Lord Brahma and the teachings on Brahma have to offer us. I didn't really get through talking enough about waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It's a way to meditate on the 3 states of your consciousness. Gross, subtle, and causal, and transcendent is how you would put that in English. And we know already that what the gross is and how we hands off with it, and how the subtle is more like our dreams. The kingdoms of heaven begin there and stretch inward to the causal. The causal would be like here in this formless dynamism and in the realm just above Brahma, within Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And there you see also the demarcations here. Gross is here with these 20 cosmic principles, and then subtle starts here with the collective mind on in, and then causal is here. And beyond the causal there's Turiya, but formless dynamism has to be accounted for too, unmanifested Prakriti, or the realm of the Mahaprakriti, Shakti herself. Do you know what God with form is like? Like, like bubbles rising on an expanse of water. Various divine forms are seen to rise out of the great akasha of consciousness. The incarnation of God is one of these forms. The primal Shakti sports through the incarnation, as quoted by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. From the Gospel of Ramakrishna. Now, another way of looking at waking, dreaming, and deep sleep is a gift of the pre-Vedantic rishis, called Vedic rishis. They were talking about it in terms of nirguna and saguna. They just made two divisions, basically. God without attributes, God with attributes. So, long before the, not that they weren't there then, but long before the Mayavadins came along, who were describing everything as illusion, all form as illusion, the ancient rishis were being very kind to the non-self and just calling it God with attributes. And that seemed to last through that whole development of Indian thought that had to do with philosophy, that had to do with anything from God with form to God beyond form, or illusion and reality, or shunyata and purnyata, all these different ways they came to look at it, going back and forth between these very subtle dualities, even causal dualities, got all put into shape nicely in this day and age with Vivekananda's bringing this Vedanta to us, but was there at the very inception, back there with the pre-Vedantic rishis. Nirguna just means without attributes, and saguna means with attributes. The gunas are there in creation. Tamas, Rajas, Sattva, you might have heard. Tamas, the obscuring power. Rajas, the veiling power, or the distorting power rather. And Sattva, the revealing power, revelatory power. Those three levels. Or you could talk about it in terms of inertia, and then activity, and then balance. Or you could talk about it as my laziness, my restlessness, and my good days. I'm having a good hair day today, I hope. So if we look at it in terms of just a basic cut, you've got the nirguna, saguna idea, and I've made, borrowing this image for now, just made this line of demarcation very broadly there, but also has to do with the Mahashakti, who holds within her Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. We used to say that teaching was, the tempest in a teapot, was this creation, preservation, destruction always going on, with no apparent end, or even aim. But then inside of those three things, these two hands were holding it, called, projecting and withdrawing, and she was in charge of that. So this Mahaprakriti, or Divine Mother, has always been a hidden element, but a very most crucial element in all the darshanas, whether you call her Radha and Sita, or whether you call her Uma, or whether you call her Shakti and Shiva, or the Shakti of Shiva, or whatever you want to say. Always a very important element behind, and I was just singing some verses about that. Renounce my mind, be the sense flowers of this earth, and enjoy Mother's lotus feet, the nectar of Mother's lotus feet. So the Shaktas are particularly keen on that, but it doesn't mean that they have, a monopoly on her. She's there in everything, and we find her there, of course, in Judaism too, the Shekinah, and then sort of like Shakti, and we find her in Christianity as Mary, and other forms too. Always there, hidden, the universal goddess, the divine mother of the universe, the goddess of the word, Vak Devi they call her. And in the beginning was the word, so you can see how even the words of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva and their functions would flow out of this great divine Shakti. And this is a combination of several different teachings. I mean, there's the gunas, tamas, slothfulness, rajas, activity, sattva, balance. The gunas in abeyance. They've been taken into an indeterminate state here. They still can spring forth and produce worlds of name and form in time and space at any time at her behest, but they're in abeyance. So it's sort of like your deep sleep state, isn't it? It's just sort of like your deep sleep state and going into the light. And then up here, gunas transcend it completely in nirvikalpa or nirvana. So there's one system. Another system here is, of course, the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state. And I've added in there between it the visionary state, as I was explaining earlier in the first half of the class, because people have something that can neither be classed as ordinary dream or as deep sleep when everything goes into abeyance. But they have that visionary state where they're having visions of Muhammad in jeweled palaces, like some of the Sufis, or they're having visions of Moses or Jesus or Gauranga. Whatever the case may be, there's that state of consciousness where you're actually communing, darshan they call it, communing with your highest self in form. At first you think, I'm seeing a great seer who's outside of me. But then you have to say, no, he's inside of me, isn't he? And then you have to say, I and my Father are one at some point, and kind of own up to the fact that he was just a manifestation of your own mind at a very high level. So the joke in Vedanta these days is, go to the psychiatrist and they say, it's all in your mind. And the Vedanta sits up and says, you're right, doctor, it is definitely all in our mind. So we mean it in a very real way, that is as real as thought projection can be, that it's not just a figment of our imagination, as they would say, but it's a manifestation of Brahman. And that would be the Saguna Brahman definition in a nutshell. It's not real, nor is it unreal, nor is it a combination of both. Even the Mayavadins and Advaitas say that. So you can't really describe it away, nor can you describe it, nor can you get away from it. Can't live with it, can't live without it. Definitely can't live without it, because it is the very nature of everything here. It's just a matter if we see it as matter, or if we want to see it as prana, man does not live by bread alone, or if we want to see it as intelligence, or if we want to go inward up the scale, which we should if we meditate on all these positions that Lord Brahma has provided us with, and get to a higher state of contemplation and realization inside of ourself. That's the whole point. And then all these misfiances, illusions, superstitions that upbringing, religion, politics, and everything else has foisted upon us will simply be diffused, and we'll know ourselves. Only then can we come back and help others to know their self. So that way we praise her. Another way of saying is there's the 20 tattvas, add them together with the fourfold mind, which it's all done by quintuplication process. The whole thing comes forth, fives, fives, fives. And I would say that, I would add to that also the fourfold mind is 5, because you have to add Brahma in there. If you add Brahma in with thought and ego and buddhi, intelligence, and manas, then you'd have a 5-fold mind, wouldn't you? So it's really all proceeding by 5s, rolling out by that roll of the dice. I got 4 5s. I rolled. If there are 5 dice, I hope to get 5 5s. And then know the whole process from the root up. Know the non-self completely, and to know a thing is to escape fear of it. You'll always be in fear of it if you don't know it. As soon as you know it, fear goes away. So the curtain of nescience, that part that's built on fear, will thin out. And you'll stop brooding on it, which thickens it. Because you'll brood on it because you have doubts about it. And doubts will raise fear, and that you'll end up in an abject state of ignorance. So again, fear, doubt, and ignorance thicken that curtain of cloud of unknowing. And what you want to do is thin it out. And it's all up to you. No God will help you, no devil will keep you from it. It's all up to you. You can appeal to Lord Brahma, but he might have other things to do, you see, in this vast creation than just to cater to your little whims. See? So Krishna says that in the Uddhava Gita. It could be, sometimes it must be, that some souls get to God on their own merit, under their own steam. They don't rely on grace. You can wait around for grace or depend on prayer for a long time, but if you start meditating and get close to God, then the first thing will happen is that all those things that you thought you wanted will go away, because you see God and you see that nothing is worthy or compared to God. And the second thing will happen is that you want to merge in God. So with that dynamic always a part of the spiritual territories that we're exploring, then it's impossible not to be who you are and eventually realize your divine nature. So that has to do with transcending the gross, getting into the subtle, which is mostly the mind, collective mind mainly, and individual mind combined, and getting into the causal level where the Trinity operates, finding the Word, and then finding she who is the holder of the Word. See, there's Shakti, and then there's Shaktiman. There's the Word itself, and there's the holder of the Word. So she's like Shaktiman. And then you'll understand. See, there's this curtain of nescience that flows out from her. And people, beings have a difficult time penetrating that. If you go by the 7 chakra system of Kundalini, there's a subtle membrane between the gut and the heart, between the Manipura chakra and this Anahata chakra. There's a subtle membrane there that keeps the ancestors from joining the devotees and keeps the humans joining the ancestors and back to the humans. Eating, drinking, and sex life, basically the lower 3 centers. Although that's a kind of simplistic definition of them. But there's another subtler membrane here between throat and third eye, and even a subtler one between third eye and crown. So you're talking about that when you talk about these lines. They're called Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, and Rudra Granthi. So in meditation, very difficult to penetrate those, and once having done so, then the seer has a truly universal outlook and can go anywhere. Like Markandeya, the great Rishi, could go from the highest level of consciousness right on down to the lowest level of consciousness. Like Narada too could do that. One time Markandeya was right here at the eye of the cosmic being, that inner realm that signifies the eye, and he fell out of the eye into this pool, this black waters. And the little blue baby came swimming up, said, "Oh, hello, son," and he got upset. "Don't call me son, I'm your elder." And then the baby said, "I knew your father," and immediately he got very respectful. He really respected your father in those days. And so then he fell back into the eye and said, "That was a strange experience. Who was that baby?" And then he immediately started to forget what he had seen. But then he was going around these realms again, hundreds of realms, there at the level of the cosmic eye. And he fell out again and had another vision the same. And so he got to know this dynamic formlessness that happens beyond the worlds, beyond Lord Brahma's worlds. And so that there's stories like that that are in the Upanishads that talk about souls who got some very cryptic and rare knowledge of the formless. Even the formless before it became absolute formlessness, a kind of dynamic formlessness. So it has to be provided for. I think that's where they get waking, dreaming, deep sleep, Turiya, beyond the 3 states, and Turyatita, even beyond those 4 states. And so that's been put here. Here's pure intelligence flowing right out of her. I can show you, I showed you last time here a chart on the curtain of nescience that we went into. Basically, that covers that chart. And so we had a good look at Lord Brahma and Brahman, and also the Mahashakti, that are stations of very high meditation in the yogis. Now, one thing I wanted to go back on in our remaining time here is that Shloka 4 says, just as the sun shines lighting up all space above, below, and across, even so does that one adorable being, the repository of all goodness and greatness, preside over everything that has the nature of a cause. And I want to bring back this, that I did it 4 or 5 Christmases ago. Right here in Portland, created this layer chart of cause and effect. My point behind it was that I've gotten a little bit tired of people basing their existence on the physical cause alone. The physical cause is here: food, energy, sperm, ovum, physical body, 5 active senses, 5 cognitive senses, and the human brain. Then death. So basically this material cause, the anam, the mukhya prana, sukra, that's semen, maharaja, the same in the female, the subtle form, deha, the body, pancha karmandriyas, the 5 active senses, pancha gyanandriyas, the 5 cognitive senses, and the fourfold mind, antakarana, at its gross level, that is, human brain, is all what we call the physical cause. And everyone, operates on that, basically, on that premise, as if that was all there is. Well, I object. There is a cause and effect that goes deeper. In fact, it goes so deeper that without it, you would have a very hard time explaining intelligence and what man has been able to accomplish even in the material worlds. What to speak of this idea anterior to life and mind is Atman. If you want to put it in a opposite way, you could say, if you believe in a void, then where's the person who saw the void and gave it its name? See, there had to be somebody who identified it. Or, nihilism. See, you have to be. You should probably just annihilate nihilism and get it out of the picture, and then avoid the void. See, because you also have this witness of your births and deaths. Who was there to watch yourself die if it wasn't you? And who was there to watch yourself be reborn again if it wasn't you? And if hundreds and thousands of souls have seen that process going on in a more enlightened state, even in a semi-enlightened state, then you're overlooking it, and you're just thinking in terms of one birth and that's it. Then you're not only letting yourself out the back door of this great chain of cause and effect that you should be meditating on, but you're also missing out on the fact that of the real teaching of one birth. That's called the Videha Muktis. They come here once, they see the world, and they give it up. Once is enough. So for them, the one birth scenario works. You see. But for the rest, they tend to fall from that position down to these lower worlds and get trapped there. Was it back on this chart? In fact, Holy Mother said something like that. At the time of creation, people had wisdom from their very birth. Consequently, they at once realized the unreal nature of the world. They renounced it and practiced austerity. They were liberated in no time. So she's talking about some souls that had a very, very profound grasp on reality before they experienced the death in their previous birth. Past masters is a nice term. Early on, when we were musicians, we wrote a piece called Past Masters, and we liked to play it. So it gave that idea of somebody who had precognitive intelligence. So that's what I'm saying. You're really letting out the door this idea of pure intelligence. You could even say, doesn't the curtain of nescience suggest that there's intelligence? In every way, there's always a duality to everything. So if there's root ignorance, there has to be higher intelligence. That's all. So just use the very proof of the pudding, as they say, and make a conclusion. Get yourself free of old ways of thinking, outdated ways of considering. So what Vivekananda wanted us to do with such teachings. Now here, down here at the gross level, Vashishta, one of the ancient rishis, is actually one of the 10 mind-born sons of this figure. one of his 10 mind-born sons, Lord Vashishta, called one of the 10 Manus, he says, if higher knowledge is not already in the soul, then rebirth continues and there will be no recourse than to suffer cause and effect. Even striving for light will not bestow any real benefit, for to seek enlightenment without the mantra, the teachings, and the guru is like trying to grow crops only at night. So one takes a teacher and checks into the words of the scriptures. Now, there you can see basically cognitive senses are hearing, seeing, teaching, touching, tasting, and smelling. The active senses are speaking, moving, handling, procreating, and excreting, and they connect with each other, top to bottom. If you were to transcend the material cause, then you would get to what I'm calling the efficient cause. Above that's the primordial cause, just to jump to the chase. Then there's the subtle cause. Then there's the cosmic cause. Then there's the remote cause, which is the word. And then there's the causeless cause. Brahman cannot be called a cause for anything. In fact, even at the level of his word, they call it the unstruck sound. Or they call the original archetypical soul the unseen seer. They call Brahman the immovable mover, the inactive agent. They've thought up all sorts of sort of dichotomous hippopotamus terms, to try and let you know that there is this unthought, this transcendent, this unseen, this enigma, you might say, that you'll never understand, but without contemplating it, your mind won't be purified. There's actually a line in a song, you'll never understand her, but you should meditate on her, because by just meditating on her, your mind will be purified. So whatever it takes to get you up and out of this nightmare of relative existence, and the web of rebirth, or the Kala Chakra, or samsara, or Maya, what it's been called by various beings, you should take those recourse. Take that recourse and use whatever way there is to get you free. Sri Ramakrishna used to say you can get to the roof of the house by taking the stairs. You can jump up and pull yourself up. You can jump from a nearby tree. I suppose if there had been helicopters back there, he would have even used that. So he could have dropped from a helicopter. There are many ways to get to the roof, but you've got to get to the roof. So use one of these methods to do so. If you talk about the efficient cause, though, you're talking about nature and the three gunas. There they are again here. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas at these different levels. Remember, Rajas will reveal to you the nature of everything. You'll see the tree. Behind the tree is the real tree. The real tree is swirling particles. But beyond the real tree, you'll see the Buddha nature tree, which is wisdom. It's a manifestation of wisdom. It's not Maya, unless you look at it that way. As soon as you get Maya out of the picture, like getting out of the fog bank, you'll see it as it really is. Science has gone halfway and given us that idea, but the conclusion is shunyataha, it's empty. It's empty of the desire to fulfill you when it's solid. It's empty of substance when you see it as a vibrating particle. And it's empty of everything negative when you see it as essence. Isn't that the best way to describe shunyata at the highest level? What's it empty of? Empty of compassion? No. Empty of love? No. It's empty of everything that's perplexed you and evaded you and made you brood in fear and doubt. That's what it's empty of. So at least we can say that about it. Or a good penultimate conclusion, if you will. So when you get to the level of the efficient cause, then you're talking about the three gunas and nature and the 5 elements. These are a little bit put topsy-turvy, but still I think there are subtle elements, you see, they provide for not just earth, air, fire, water, and ether, but earth is connected with the tanmatras. That is odor, is a tanmatra. It's different than smelling, right? Because that's an active sense. But there's an odor to a thing. So that's a subtle element that connects with the gross part of the element, that connects with your gross senses, that also connects with your subtle senses, which are in dream, because you also smell odors in a dream and see lakes and see fires. So you have a whole set of subtle senses that are there when you turn off your gross senses in sleep. That's really your dreaming state, isn't it? So you have a lot to your consciousness there to examine. Anyway, in the 10 minutes remaining, we can look at this layer cake of causes. Here's the primordial cause comes next. That would have to be those two things that are most difficult for people to understand, the tanmatras and the prana. Those are the two missing links in Western thinking, why they can't connect the gross ether to the subtle ether. Because, I could bring out the Russian dolls chart and show you how one doll fits inside the next and so forth, and show you how when the physical atomic particle goes away, that is basically it doesn't have a life. Billionth of a second is not a very long lifetime, you might say. So when that disappears, what happens next? The level of your ancestors, prana. Man does not live by bread alone. You go to the next level of particle, which is not in the physical realm. You just slip into that, and the only way you can visit it is by meditation. And you're going to have to know the prana to do that. So there are two ways in which the Kundalini Yoga Upanishad says you should do it. Either get a hold of the prana, that's the inferior way, or that mental asana I was talking about. Come here already mastered in your mind. You have to purify your mind first, and the prana will obey you. But if you find yourself not in that situation, then get here and get a hold of the prana. For instance, if you practice your breathing exercises, is it just to make yourself feel good? Or is it just to make your mind quiet? Or to get rid of anxiety or whatever? No. Practice the breathing exercise is to actually get a hold of the prana, because the ingoing breath, uprising breath, is what takes your thoughts to a higher level. And when you let that breath out, it lets you sleep, go into deep sleep. And when you sustain that in the middle, of course, that's sustaining wisdom. So your breath is, your three movements of your breath, there's really four, but the three basic movements of your breath is to equip you with that kind of understanding, that kind of security, that kind of foundation. So now, when I breathe, I can take full advantage of that, but I can also stop my breath. And when I stop my breath, I can see the prana flowing. So that uprising prana is causing the minds to aspire. It's taking souls, probably hundreds and hundreds of them since I started speaking 3 hours ago, to different places. Outside the body at death, and also in deep sleep and dream. It's taking them out of this realm and into another realm, either permanently or temporarily. So this prana is exceedingly important to understand, and we could get into the prana chart, and that I could probably show you too, and show you how prana metamorphoses into higher things until finally it just becomes her. Because didn't we start off with the very first sloka? It said, he is Brahman, he is Atman, he is prana. See? So even at the Trinity, they're acknowledging that prana is there. It's at a very high form at that place. So anyway, prana is what's called the primordial cause in this chart. Then you can understand the subtle cause. The desire for activity, the desire for life, the mind, its thought, the projected self called the ego, and the intelligence is all there in that subtle body. That's the subtle cause of things. Karma, kama, manas, chitta, ahamkara, and buddhi. And you'll understand things like the desire to be active, and maybe to get your duty done and go to an inactive state, because you want to also know the art of inaction. You'll also know things like desire for life, or as Vivekananda said, this thirst for life forever quench.
It drags from birth to death and death to birth, the soul.
It drags from birth to death and death to birth the soul. So we want to master the prana so that we can use it to get out of being born again in ignorance, or use it to come back here again in full knowledge of ourselves. Those are basically your two options. Now, in the 5 minutes remaining, we'll go on and just take a quick look at the rest of this chart. Cosmic cause comes next. Purusha, Niyati, kalas, and raga, kala deha nimitta, desha nimitta, and vidya and maya all form that. In other words, the individual soul, the Purusha, which is different than the projected soul, the ego, which is probably also different than the Paramatman, the Supreme Soul, there is a real individual soul, I like to say, the Purusha. That's why Samkhya provided for so many of them. It's intelligence, it's the sentient principle, whereas matter is the insentient principle, and those two are always vying for supremacy. Niyati, kalas, and raga are those very difficult things to know about deep sleep and formless dynamism. That's where the Shaivites added 12 higher spandhas, or vibrational spheres, to Kapila's early system. Cosmic laws and how they work, phases of time. There's kala, time, and then there's phases of time, kalas, and how that grinds on. And also the power of attraction, ragas. That is, we'll know why, what keeps the atom together, right? The molecules and the quarks and all that. And then we'll also know why the baby's attracted to the mother, and we'll also know why the two lovers are attracted to each other, and why the devotee is attracted to God. We'll also know why poor souls are attracted to matter only. See, we'll know the power of attraction, yoga maya, and we'll use it at all levels. So that's a cosmic cause, that why you meditate on the Trinity and hold that, hold yourself in that. Time, space, and causation, kala, desha, nimitta, always on the mind of the seers. They're not looking at it just in terms of a linear thing. Again, they're looking at it, that term is that cyclic. And that's time. And space, they're looking at it as 5 Russian dolls. Physical space, energy space, mental space, intelligent space, spiritual space. Those are all the kingdoms of heaven within you as a gift from him, the 10 mind-born son of Lord Brahma. Vishishta gave you the 5 akashas. Unmanifested nature is there. That's all up in here. Formless dynamism. Unmanifested prakriti is the bulk of the iceberg, whereas all of this you're seeing in the physical universe is the tip. Higher cognizance is vidya. That's going to be a very high form of intelligence, more like this as it comes in and out of her and flows out. Eventually that very intelligence, that very intelligence will turn into earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So nothing here but your intelligence, if you're a wisdom knower. If you're not, nothing here but the world-perplexing Maya. That's why you fear of water, because you drowned in a previous lifetime and you never looked at it. Then form and formlessness, that highest of all conundrums, the subtlest of all dualities, would also be a part of the cosmic cause. To go beyond that is to go to the remote cause, I call. That's Om, really. But it has Mahaprakriti, her, in it. That is, all of this gunas in abeyance, everything taken up into an indeterminate state, like a huge chest of drawers that she stores things in. So, yes, the Tyrannosaurus Rex is still there. Yes, the endangered species are still there. Yes, Elvis is still there. So, deal with it. You have to deal with it. Thank you very much. Form and formlessness, the most subtle of all dualities, and probably along with bondage and liberation. Those two vie for supremacy. Now, remote cause, as I was saying, unstruck sound, unmanifested nature, very good to meditate on unmanifested prakriti, where everything goes when it goes into formlessness. That's why we connect it with our deep sleep state, and eventually even with our visionary state, so that we can see actually what's transpiring when everything is drawn back into formlessness. Remember, 4 times when you go into formlessness. One's called deep sleep, one's called death, at least for a time you will, and then one's called a good meditation, non-dual meditation, the other's called samadhi. So better not to wait for death to know your formless nature, and probably not going to be sufficient just to know it through deep sleep, unless you can pierce through that curtain of nescience. Better yet to do it in meditation, and then have samadhi, have nirvana, have that state which is your true nature. Then you'll see the primordial soul, Lord Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, call it Ishvara if you wish. The manifestations of that are numerous, say in the terms of Vasishta, in terms of Vedavyas, in terms of Buddha, in terms of Christ, and Patanjali, Chaitanya, Ramakrishna, and so forth, all the way forward and back from Krishna to Ramakrishna, or Rama to Ramakrishna. You'll find Ishvara is coming again and again. Don't wait for Christ to manifest again for 2,000 years. He's been here 4 times already. Probably more. In fact, he might be being born with every Christian that comes out of the womb. Jesus is there, isn't he? So start making that identification, not only in time, but beyond time, with your true nature. And don't wait around for nothing. Nothing doesn't exist. Now, beyond the remote cause is a causeless cause, and I'll end with that chant, that sloka. We had started with Vashishta, we can end with him. Inner analysis brings the first real glimmerings of spirituality. In that light, the soul perceives the assumed happenstance of cause and effect. It's all one big layer cake. In a series of deep recollections, it scrutinizes life, even in infanthood, and glimpses past lifetimes. By perceiving its origin, it courts freedom. So, looking into the effect being the cause, and that cause being the effect of another cause, and that cause being the effect of yet another cause, you trace this line of breadcrumbs back to the original source. And good meditators can do this in less than an hour, maybe 10 minutes. In other words, they sit, take it all, know it all, study it all, reflect on it all, and then actually do the trip, do the journey in and out, and come out refreshed. See, I know myself and I know my non-self, or at least I know my non-self. Myself is now just waiting for me with no barriers in the way. And then it's up to her whether or not, when you will have that enlightened state, or how long you'll have it, or how deep it goes, or if you'll stay in the body or leave the body. I hope you'll all stay in the body at least for tomorrow's class. So let's end here with a chant. Om Sato, ma Satgamaya, Tamaso ma Joytirgamaya, Mrichorma Amritam Gamaya, Abira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinamukam, Tenamam Pahinicham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, Brahma and Shakti, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hare